Prepare to be chilled to the bone? Have you ever felt that prickling sensation on the back of your neck? The one that whispers you're not alone, even when logic dictates otherwise? What if that feeling wasn't just paranoia, but a chilling premonition of something terrifying lurking just around the corner? Brace yourselves, because what you're about to read is not just another late-night work story. It's a descent into the heart of a fear so raw, so personal. It will make you question every shadow in your own life. This is the story of Maya, a young woman just trying to make ends meet, working the dreaded night shift at a sprawling, soulless Walmart in the outskirts of town. Stick with me, because you won't believe where this story goes. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe, so we can cross the veil between worlds together, uncovering spine-chilling mysteries from the beyond. Maya hated the night shift. It wasn't the work itself, though restocking shelves of electronics at 3 a.m. wasn't exactly her dream career. It was the sheer emptiness of it all, the way time stretched and warped under the fluorescent hum, the sense of being adrift in a vast, retail ocean with only the occasional lost soul to break the monotony. She was working nights to save up, to finally escape the suffocating small town she'd grown up in and chase a real life, a vibrant life, somewhere, anywhere else. College applications were in, scholarships were pending, and every late-night shift was another step towards freedom. Electronics was her usual domain, a relatively quiet island in the otherwise echoing expanse of the megastore during the graveyard hours. People didn't exactly stampede to buy Bluetooth speakers and phone chargers at 2 a.m. Most of the clientele were nocturnal creatures of habit, truckers grabbing last-minute supplies before hitting the road again, insomniacs wandering aimlessly, maybe the odd teenager on a dare. The routine was predictable, almost hypnotic. Scan the planogram, replenish the headphones, dust the glass cases holding the tantalizingly out-of-reach smartphones. Repeat. It was mind-numbing, but Maya had learned to find a strange sort of peace in the quiet solitude, in the rhythmic motions of her tasks. She'd plug in her earbuds, lose herself in audiobooks or podcasts, and let the hours melt away. Tonight, though, something felt different. A subtle shift in the atmosphere, like the air itself had thickened. The usual dull hum of the overhead lights seemed louder, more insistent. Even her music, usually a comforting shield, felt tinny and distant, failing to truly block out the vast silence of the store. It started subtly, a flicker in her peripheral vision, a sense of being watched, a primal instinct that set the hairs on her arms on end. Maya, ever practical, dismissed it as fatigue. Night shifts played tricks on your mind. Shadows danced in the corners of your vision, sounds amplified in the stillness, and paranoia became an unwelcome, but frequent, companion. But the feeling persisted. It was like a persistent itch you couldn't quite scratch, a low hum of unease that resonated deeper and deeper inside her. She tried to focus on her work, meticulously arranging rows of USB cables, but her attention kept drifting, pulled by an invisible thread to the edge of her perception. And then she saw him. At first, she barely registered him as anything more than another late-night wanderer. Just another guy meandering the aisles, probably killing time, waiting for someone, or simply lost in his own thoughts. He was in the next aisle over, browsing the clearance electronics, the outdated gadgets and slightly damaged boxes that even insomniacs and truckers seemed to pass by. Maya glanced at him, a fleeting, almost unconscious observation. He was nondescript, ordinary, average height, dressed in dark, unremarkable clothes. Nothing that screamed threat or danger. Just a man, seemingly looking at deeply discounted Bluetooth earbuds. But as the minutes ticked by, the unease grew, solidifying into something more concrete, something chillingly real. Because he wasn't shopping. He wasn't even pretending to. Every time Maya glanced up, he was there, lingering nearby, hovering in the next aisle, standing a little too still by the clearance section. It wasn't just coincidence. It was deliberate. He was placing himself within her line of sight, always present, always watching. He never picked anything up, never examined a product, never even seemed to look at the shelves. His gaze, though she couldn't be sure, felt directed towards her. It was a presence, a shadow moving just beyond the edges of her attention, always there, always observing. A shiver traced its way down Maya's spine, despite the stuffy, artificially heated air of the Walmart. This wasn't just paranoia. This was calculated. This felt intentional. And the intent, she realized with a growing knot of dread in her stomach, felt directed at her. Her heart started to tap a quicker rhythm against her ribs. Her breath hitched slightly in her throat. The initial unease was morphing into something colder, something bordering on fear. She tried to rationalize it away. Maybe he was waiting for someone, and he was just restless. Maybe he was shy. Maybe he was going to ask her for help with something. But deep down, in the primal, instinctual part of her brain, Maya knew this wasn't normal. This wasn't the behavior of someone lost or shy or waiting for a friend. This was predatory. The way he moved, always just close enough for her to notice, never actually engaging with the merchandise, never making eye contact, yet somehow always there. It was unsettling in a way that chilled her to the bone. She told herself she was overthinking it. Walmart was a public place. People wandered. People lingered. She was just tired, stressed about school, letting her imagination run wild in the dead of night. But the feeling wouldn't recede. It clung to her, a cold, clammy hand squeezing her insides. She considered using her radio to call someone, to just announce casually to anyone listening, "Hey, anyone nearby? Just wondering if you could do a quick walkthrough of electronics?" Just to have another human presence nearby, to dispel this growing sense of isolation and dread. She reached for her radio, clipped to her belt. She pressed the transmit button, thumb hovering over the call button. Anyone in hardware or housewares? Can you hear me?" Silence. Just static. She tried again. Louder, clearer. Radio check? Anyone on channel 1? Nothing. Dead air. Frustration flickered through her. Typical. Of course, tonight, of all nights, her radio batteries would be dead. She'd meant to replace them last week, but it had slipped her mind. Now, in the echoing silence of the almost empty Walmart, the dead radio felt less like an inconvenience and more like a cruel joke, a deliberate severing of her lifeline to the outside world. A fresh wave of anxiety washed over her. Isolated. Watched. No way to call for help if things escalated. Escalated to what? She didn't even know, but the word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken dread. She glanced back towards the clearance aisle. He was still there, exactly as before, a dark, motionless figure against the brightly lit shelves, seemingly oblivious to her, yet intently focused. The feeling of being watched intensified, becoming almost tangible, like a physical pressure. Maya started debating whether she should just go find a manager, walkie-talkie or not. Just leave electronics, walk to the customer service desk, find someone, anyone. But the thought of leaving her post, of turning her back on him, of walking through the empty aisles, exposed and vulnerable, made her stomach clench. It felt like walking into a trap. She was frozen, caught in the crosshairs of her own escalating fear, paralyzed by indecision. Should she stay? Should she go? Should she confront him? Should she run? Each option seemed fraught with danger, each path leading to an unknown, but undoubtedly terrifying, outcome. Just as she was about to force herself to move, to make any decision, to break free from this terrifying inertia, she felt it. A hand wrapped around her arm. Cold, firm, unexpected. Maya's breath hitched in her throat. Her heart leaped into her chest, slamming against her ribs like a trapped bird. A jolt of pure, unadulterated terror shot through her, so potent it nearly knocked the breath from her lungs. She recoiled instinctively, a strangled gasp escaping her lips, muscles tensing, ready to fight, to flee, to do anything to escape the sudden, shocking contact. But before she could react, before she could even process what was happening, a voice, a woman's voice, rang out, loud, friendly, overly familiar. "There you are." The words exploded into the quiet air of the electronics section, jarringly out of place, yet somehow, reassuringly normal. The hand on her arm tightened for a fraction of a second, then loosened slightly. "I've been looking all over for you," the woman exclaimed, the voice bright and cheerful. almost theatrical in its forced enthusiasm. It was a voice Maya had never heard before, yet it radiated a strange, unsettling familiarity, like a poorly acted role in a low-budget play. Maya turned, completely thrown off balance, reeling from the sudden touch, the loud voice, the sheer unexpectedness of it all. Her mind struggled to catch up, to make sense of the chaotic rush of sensory input. And then she saw her, a woman, standing close, too close, her hand still firmly clamped on Maya's arm, a wide, plastic smile plastered across her face. She was a stranger, completely unknown to Maya, yet her eyes held a disconcerting intensity, a strange, almost manic energy that didn't quite match the forced cheerfulness of her voice. Before Maya could speak, before she could even form a coherent thought, the woman leaned in, her smile widening, becoming almost grotesque in its exaggeration. Her tone dropped, the cheerful facade cracking, revealing something lower, more urgent, more dangerous, lurking beneath. "That guy's been recording you." The words were whispered, hissed almost, right into Maya's ear, sending a fresh wave of icy dread washing over her. They were delivered with a breathless urgency, a conspiratorial intimacy that felt utterly wrong, completely violating the forced friendliness of her earlier greeting. Recording her? The blood drained from Maya's face. Her stomach plummeted. The cold knot of fear in her gut tightened into a painful, constricting fist. Recording her doing what? Just working? Just existing? The thought was repulsive, violating, utterly terrifying in its implication. Without conscious thought, she turned her head slightly, just enough to glance back, to confirm, to deny, to understand. And there he was, the man from the clearance aisle, still there, exactly where she'd last seen him. But now, everything had changed. The innocuous facade of casual browsing had completely shattered. He wasn't even pretending anymore. He wasn't looking at the shelves. He wasn't pretending to be interested in discounted electronics. He was staring directly at her, his gaze locked onto hers, unwavering, intense, predatory. The subtle unease, the creeping paranoia, the vague sense of being watched, it all coalesced in that single, chilling moment into a stark, undeniable reality. He had been watching her. He was watching her. And the woman was warning her. Or was she? A cold wave of confusion washed over Maya, mingling with the raw, primal fear. Who was this woman? Why was she helping her? Could she be trusted? Or was this all part of some elaborate, terrifying game? "Follow me." The woman hissed again, tugging firmly on Maya's arm, pulling her away, deeper into the store. "We have to go? Now." Maya didn't question it, didn't hesitate, didn't think. The fear was too overwhelming, the threat too palpable, the woman's urgency too convincing. The way she had grabbed her arm, the way she had spoken, so loud and casually, like they were old friends, reuniting after years apart. She clung to it, desperate for any semblance of normalcy in this rapidly unraveling reality. She was beyond grateful that someone, anyone, had realized something was wrong, had put herself in an uncomfortable position, had stepped into the chilling silence of the night shift to help her. She let the woman pull her along, her legs moving almost automatically, her mind a whirlwind of fear, confusion, and a desperate, fragile hope that this strange woman was truly a rescuer, not another part of the nightmare. The woman kept up the act as they walked, rambling in that overly cheerful, jarringly fake voice about something. Maya barely registered the words, her brain too overloaded with adrenaline and terror to process the nonsensical babble. Maybe a trip she had taken? Maybe some inside joke they supposedly shared? It was all a blur, a meaningless soundtrack to her flight, a desperate attempt by the woman to maintain the illusion, to keep the charade going. To what? To protect her? To lull her into a false sense of security? Maya couldn't tell. Her thoughts were stuck on him. The man. Recording her. Was it true? Had he really been recording her? The thought was repulsive, sickening, and terrifying. What would he do with the recording? Who was he? And why her? She desperately wanted to know if he was still following them, if the woman's intervention had been enough to deter him, or if he was still lurking, still watching, still planning. But she couldn't muster the courage to turn around, to risk catching his gaze again, to confirm her worst fears. The image of his blank, staring face was burned into her mind, a chilling tableau of silent menace that she couldn't bear to revisit. The woman steered her through the aisles, moving fast, her grip on Maya's arm tight and unwavering. They moved away from electronics, deeper into the store, past housewares, past clothing, past areas that were even emptier, even more desolate in the pre-dawn hours. Maya barely noticed where they were going. Her focus narrowed to the woman's hand on her arm, to the sound of their footsteps echoing in the vast silence, to the persistent, gnawing fear that clung to her like a shroud. All she knew was that they were moving, that the distance between her and that man was growing. And for now, that was enough. In all honesty, Maya had been half expecting the woman to drop the pretense at some point, to abandon the charade of familiarity, to reveal her true intentions. But she kept it up, the forced cheerfulness, the meaningless chatter, the unwavering grip on Maya's arm. It was unnerving, surreal, like being trapped in a bizarre, poorly acted play, where she was the unwitting, terrified lead actress, and the audience was who? And what was the final act? At one point, the woman's rambling became even more disjointed, the forced smile on her face starting to waver, the cheerful facade beginning to crumble under the strain. It was getting uncomfortable, even more so than the initial terror had been. The woman's grip on her arm felt tighter, almost painful. Her voice, though still pitched in that unnaturally cheerful tone, started to tremble slightly. And then, finally, Maya dared to glance behind her. Just a quick, furtive peek over her shoulder. And to her relief, he was gone. The man from electronics was no longer following. Had the woman scared him off? Had they truly escaped? A fragile tendril of hope, tentative and hesitant, began to unfurl in the frozen wasteland of her fear. "We're good now," Maya said, her voice barely a whisper, hoarse and shaky. She tried to inject a note of normalcy into her tone, to break through the suffocating tension. "We should probably go find my manager." But the woman just squeezed her arm tighter, her smile not faltering, but somehow morphing, becoming less friendly, less cheerful, more fixed, more predatory. "He's still lurking somewhere," the woman insisted, her voice dropping again, the forced cheerfulness replaced by a low, urgent intensity. "We can't stop yet. Not yet." Maya frowned, confusion battling with the lingering fear. "So what?" she managed to croak out, her voice still trembling. "What's he going to do? In a store full of employees?" The words sounded weak, unconvincing, even to her own ears. The store full of employees felt vast and empty in the dead of night, and the image of the man's blank, staring face flashed again in her mind, erasing any flicker of reassurance. She was still scared, deeply, viscerally scared. But now, a new emotion was starting to creep in, a chilling realization that was perhaps even more terrifying than the initial threat. Because now that she wasn't alone, now that she had this rescuer by her side, Maya started realizing that there wasn't much of a point at being scared anymore. Not of him, but of her. She told the woman this, her voice gaining a little more strength, a little more resolve. "It's okay," she said, trying to sound braver than she felt. "We're safe now. You can let go." But the woman continued moving, pulling Maya along, her smile fixed, her grip unyielding. "Come on," she repeated, her voice taking on a new, almost petulant edge. "Just a little further." She tugged, basically dragging Maya at this point, deeper and deeper into the store. "No," Maya said, more firmly this time, planting her feet, refusing to be pulled any further. She twisted her arm slightly, trying to loosen the woman's grip. "You can let go now." The woman didn't. She stopped walking, finally, but her smile remained, fixed and unsettling, her eyes locked onto Maya's, holding a strange, unreadable intensity. "Come on," she repeated, her voice softening, becoming almost pleading. "Just a little further." And then Maya glanced around, truly looked at their surroundings for the first time since the woman had grabbed her arm. And what she saw sent a fresh jolt of terror through her, colder and more paralyzing than anything she had felt before. The store was basically dead. They had moved far past the registers, past the self-checkout kiosks, past the aisles that saw the most foot traffic, even during the desolate night shift hours. They were in the back of the store, in the dimly lit periphery, approaching the areas that were rarely visited, even by employees. The warehouse section loomed ahead, a vast, cavernous space, dimly lit and nearly empty, rows upon rows of towering shelves casting long, menacing shadows in the weak overhead lighting. Beyond that, Maya knew, was the side exit, the one without cameras, the one employees used for loading shipments, the one that led directly out of the store into the dark, deserted parking lot. And that's when it dawned on her. With sickening, gut-wrenching clarity, Maya realized where the woman was leading her. Not to safety, not to help, but away from everything, everyone. Away from the faint hope of rescue. Straight to the exit. Straight into the darkness. Straight into their waiting arms. The realization hit her like a physical blow, knocking the breath from her lungs, freezing her blood in her veins. This woman, she wasn't her rescuer. She was part of it. She was leading her directly into a trap. The forced cheerfulness, the fake familiarity, the whispered warning. It had all been a carefully constructed performance, a calculated manipulation, designed to lure her away, to isolate her, to deliver her to him, and to whoever else was waiting. Panic, raw and untamed, exploded inside her. This wasn't just creepy. This wasn't just unsettling. This was the abduction. This was her worst nightmare, unfolding in slow motion in the sterile, brightly lit aisles of a Walmart at 3 a.m. She didn't think, didn't plan, didn't hesitate. Instinct took over, primal and fierce. Adrenaline surged through her veins, lending her a strength she didn't know she possessed. She screamed, a raw, piercing scream that tore through the silence of the store, a sound of pure, unadulterated terror that echoed off the high ceilings, a desperate cry for help, a primal scream of survival. And as she screamed, she yanked her arm free, with all her might, twisting, pulling, wrenching herself away from the woman's deceptively strong grip. The woman's fingers slipped, lost their hold, just enough for Maya to break free, to tear herself away from the smiling predator. She didn't waste another second, didn't look back, didn't think about anything except escape. She turned and ran blindly, desperately, towards the front of the store, towards the distant glow of the registers, towards the faint hope of safety, towards any other human being, anyone who could hear her scream, anyone who could help. As she fled, she heard the woman yell out something behind her. The cheerful facade was completely gone now, replaced by something sharp, something angry, something possessive. She yelled for Maya to come back. "Come back here!" she shrieked, her voice echoing through the store, laced with fury and frustration. And then, chillingly, terrifyingly, she yelled out Maya's name. "Maya! Get back here, Maya!" Her name. How did she know her name? Maya hadn't told her her name, hadn't spoken a single word to her, except for that weak, "We're good now." The woman shouldn't know her name, but she did, and the knowledge was like another icy hand gripping Maya's heart, squeezing the last vestiges of hope, chilling her to the very core of her being. She didn't stop running, didn't slow down, didn't even look back. The sound of her name, uttered by that stranger's voice, echoing in the empty Walmart, propelled her forward, fueled by pure, unadulterated terror. She ran until she saw him. One of her co-workers, a young guy named David, running towards her, his face etched with confusion and alarm, most likely reacting to her screaming. "Maya, what's wrong? What happened?" She stumbled towards him, gasping for breath, tears streaming down her face, her body shaking uncontrollably. "Call security," she choked out, her voice barely audible. "Call security, please. There's someone." David, thankfully, didn't hesitate. He pulled out his radio, his face grim, his eyes wide with concern. He spoke quickly, urgently into the device, his voice strained. "Security to electronics. Emergency. We need security in electronics now. Employee in distress." Maya clung to him, her body trembling, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her mind still racing, replaying the terrifying encounter, the blank stare of the man, the forced smile of the woman, the chilling realization of the trap. By the time security guards arrived, summoned by David's frantic radio call, the woman was long gone. And so was the man from electronics. They had vanished back into the vast, anonymous expanse of the Walmart, leaving behind only a chilling echo of terror and a young woman shaken to her core. Maya told her story to the security guards, her voice still trembling, her words tumbling out in a rush of fear and adrenaline. They listened, their faces growing increasingly grim as she recounted the events of the past terrifying minutes. They reviewed the security footage, rewinding, zooming in, their expressions hardening as the truth unfolded on the monitors. And just as Maya had suspected, the woman and the man had walked into the store together. The footage showed them entering side by side, chatting casually, their movements synchronized, their deception meticulously planned. The man's face was clear as day in one of the frames, his blank, staring expression even more chilling on the screen. But the woman's face was always turned away, always strategically positioned just outside the camera's view. A masterclass in calculated evasion. Maya had a feeling, a sickening certainty that settled deep in her gut, that the woman was the mastermind behind the whole thing, the orchestrator of the terrifying charade, the puppeteer pulling the strings. And she, Maya, had been the intended puppet, lured into their carefully laid trap. The police got involved. Statements were taken. Security footage was handed over. The whole thing was officially logged as a failed abduction attempt, a chillingly clinical label for a night that had stolen a piece of Maya's soul. The investigation stalled quickly. Despite the man's face being clearly captured on camera, they couldn't identify him. He was a ghost, a phantom, a face in a grainy security still, leading nowhere. The woman, even more elusive, remained completely untraceable. Weeks turned into months. The case went cold. The fear, however, remained, lingering in the shadows of Maya's mind, whispering in the silence of the night, a constant, chilling reminder of how vulnerable she had been, how close she had come to something unspeakable. She never worked another night shift at Walmart, or anywhere else for that matter. The fluorescent hum, the echoing silence, the vast emptiness of those desolate hours, they were all forever tainted, forever associated with the terror of that night. The night she was targeted, the night she almost became a victim. And even now, years later, she still wonders. How did they know her name? Why her? What would have happened if she hadn't screamed? If she hadn't run? If she had gone just a little further? Into the darkness? The questions haunt her still, whispers in the dark, echoes of a terror that refuses to fade, a chilling reminder that sometimes the monsters aren't lurking in the shadows. Sometimes they're smiling right at you, offering a helping hand, luring you into the light and into the abyss. What do you think happened to Maya? Was this truly a failed abduction? Or was there something even more sinister at play? Let me know your theories in the comments below. And if you want to hear more chilling stories like this, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment, and maybe, just maybe, we'll delve deeper into the darkness in part 2. If you dare.